Welcome back to Humbled Highs. This is your host, Andrew. Hope you guys have been enjoying the story so far. I got plenty more for you. I really hope you're sharing this with your friends and family on your social medias. Let's get this out to the people because I believe that God can change the hearts and the minds of people, even criminals, even the worst of people. And so that's why I'm telling these stories. This story, episode 4, is called Tales of Chasing Shadows. And this is going to be stories about my drug running days, right? I was still a drug dealer, but I had to get my drugs. Before I hired a driver, I had to go get them myself. So the first rule you do as a drug runner is you want to get a car that nobody notices, that a cop's just going to forget about, right? And I had 2 different cars over my period of running that I used. Both of them pretty familiar cars to you. Hyundai Elantra, a sedan, silver, and a Mazda 323, silver, sedan. Why silver? It's easily forgotten by cops. The last thing you want to be driving is a bright yellow Ford Raptor jacked up on 33s, and then you drive through Kansas, and then 2 days later you drive back. That cop's going to notice it. And by the way, I knew a drug runner from P circles, and he drove this electric blue Ford Raptor. Dude ended up getting busted. Wonder why? Yeah. Second rule is you better make sure your car doesn't break down. So throughout this whole period, every single week, I took my cars to a mechanic. And this mechanic I trusted, this mechanic I paid in cash. And I would say, he never asked any questions, but I was like, go over this car with a fine tooth comb. And if there's anything that even looks like it needs to be replaced, replace it. And I said, I cannot have this car breaking down. And he'd be like, okay. Sometimes I'd pick the car up and there wouldn't be nothing wrong with it. And I'd be like, man, I really need you to find something wrong with it because it makes me feel itchy if there's not something that you fixed. And he's like, your car's in perfect shape. He's like, this is the most highly maintenance car I've ever worked on. I'm like, yeah, but are you sure? He'd be like, yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Well, my first trip, I think I was in my Hyundai Elantra, and I had to go out. This was before Colorado was recreational legal. So this is when the P-Man was getting it from Cali. And I went out there to Cali, up to Humboldt County. They call it the Emerald Triangle. And that's where it's all grown at in California. It's like mountainside, beautiful. It actually looks a lot like Tennessee, and the people are a lot like Tennessee. Like you'd think that Californians are all like the Southern Californians, but no, it's a huge state and people are all different. So them Northern Californians, they're really cool. And how long is it a drive from Nashville to Northern California? That's 24 hours of driving, right? And so I thought I had this all figured out, all right? So I had a friend who made these, he made speaker boxes, and he made beautiful speaker boxes. And I've always been into big stereo systems ever since I had my first car. And so I thought, like, I want to have a stash spot that even if I get pulled over, then the cops won't be able to find it. So I had this friend. I said, do you think you can make this speaker box with like some kind of device that I can hit a button up in the dash and it'll open the speaker box up, and then I can put all the weed that I'm trying to transport in the speaker box? He said he never thought about doing anything like that, but he thought he could. So he gave it a shot. He put this motor on the inside he carpeted the box, put speakers in it. I think it was some 12-inch speakers, two of them. And he wired it up to where you hit like the hazard button and you hit another button on the dash. I forget what it was, but you have to hit two different buttons on the inside of the car. And then this speaker box, the motor would open up, and the speakers, the whole front of it would come down, and then it'd leave this big open space. And I thought I had it all figured out, right? Gonna get everything in there. So I drove all the way to California. I met P and this shady dude at this hotel, and it was my first run, and it was 10 pounds. And I'm out there in the parking lot in the middle of the night, and I'm trying to stuff 10 pounds of pot into this speaker box. And man, I couldn't even get half of it in there. I was so disheartened because I'd spent so much money on building this box and having it installed. And man, I couldn't even fit like 10 loaves of bread in there. So it didn't really work out. But thankfully, I only went out to Cali one time. Now, P went out there multiple times, but, you know, like I said, he only got real, like, squirrely stuff. It wasn't all that good. And that's when Colorado started opening up. And I started making multiple trips to Colorado, you know, once every couple weeks. Then it got to be once every 10 days. And it got to be once every week. And I would just drive, you know, straight through Illinois and then cut across Kansas. And I don't know if y'all ever drove through Kansas, but it is flat as concrete for miles and miles, in wind farms. And I mean, I used to hate it because, you know, a cop could sit like 10 miles down the road and they could see you coming from forever away. And, you know, I just always felt like they had binoculars and they were listening, and it just made me feel so paranoid, right? And I hated it. I hated driving through Kansas. Plus, it's super boring. There's nothing to look at. There's like one exit every 10 miles. So it wasn't all that, wasn't that jazzy to drive through Kansas. But another story is I took my older brother, 17 years older than me, Matt. Matt told me he needed some green. He wanted to get a little bit, and more than a little bit, but and it was coming up on Christmas time, right? And he lives in Florida, and he came up with his wife's car in a little Honda Civic, a little sedan. And I said, yeah, I think this car will be fine for us to ride in, because it's nobody will really notice. And so we take off like 2 days before Christmas to pick up 10 pounds, and we were going to meet P at a hotel room. And bro, a snowstorm hit right in the middle of Kansas. And I mean, it dropped like a foot of snow. We're on the interstate, and like we can't even hardly see. And I was so paranoid. I'm driving, and there's this semi that's there's way up in front of us, and I'm going like 40, not trying to get close to nobody. And this girl, she blazes up on the fast lane, going the speed limit, like 70 or something. And I'm like, I looked at my brother, I'm like, uh-oh, this is not going to be good. And we see her, she gets all the way up to the tractor trailer about half a mile ahead, and she loses control. She hits that tractor trailer. The tractor trailer jackknifes, goes completely sideways across the interstate. And by the time we're getting up to it, I cannot slow down, or else it's not even going to stop. And thankfully, man, your boy back in the day, I used to drive in the snow in this little tiny car. I used to practice in the snow. I used to practice losing control of my vehicle and using the emergency brake. And I even drove out on a lake when it froze when I was in high school. I even drove out there on the lake in this little tiny car and was doing donuts. Crazy, stupid stuff. But so like I had this innate skill that I got to use that day. And so we approached this jackknife trailer on the interstate. I come up on it, and I do this Fast and the Furious move where I got all the way over to the shoulder, grabbed the emergency brake, cut the wheel, and we did this kind of like this little slide and turn past the tractor trailer that was now covering the whole, all 2 lanes of the interstate. And we just barely sneaked by him at like a 45-degree angle. The back end of the car hit one of those mile markers, kicked us back going forward, and boom, we was gone. And let me tell you, we pulled over at the next exit, and my brother was shook. He smoked a whole cigar. Anyway, we got to Colorado, to the hotel, met up with P. We put everything in boxes and wrapped it up with Christmas wrapping and wrote to Timmy from Grandma, and we got it back. So I made dozens of trips to Colorado by myself, and that's 16 hours of driving, and that will drive you absolutely crazy if you let it. It's like, I can't even tell you what it feels like as far as stress goes. But if you imagine like 2 or 3 fat guys laying on you on the pavement, I mean, that's similar to what it feels like. It's an incredible amount of pressure. What I did was I would listen to Stephen King audiobooks, because, them books are like 3 fingers thick. So I'd listen to, however many books I listened to, and it seemed to calm my nerves, because I would stop focusing on the fact that I had a felony, a federal offense in the back of my trunk, riding with 20, 25 pounds, 30, 35 pounds, whatever, from Colorado back to Tennessee. And I also, one of my rules was I'd only drive when the most people were driving on the road. I didn't want to drive in the middle of the night. So I would just drive 8 hours. I would get a hotel or a motel, and then I'd drive another 8 hours during the day, because you want to be out there when the most people are out there. You don't want to be solo dolo by yourself on the interstate. It leaves yourself wide open. Another story. This one time I rented a Buick Regal, a brand new one. I used to love renting cars all the time. Used to rent exotic cars, loved them. But I rented this Regal, really nice car, and I took my son, right? My son, I think it was 15 or so at the time. I took him up there with me to Colorado, wanted to show him around, and by the way, we're going to pick up some pot. I think we picked up 20 pounds that time. And I told him on the way back, I said, listen, if you see a cop sitting on the side of the road, whatever you do, don't point at him. Don't say anything. Don't alert me that there's a cop, because trust me, I'm already looking out for him, and I'm not speeding anyway. I'm only going like 4 miles above the speed limit. And, I don't fault him at all, but we're driving down the interstate, and there's a Kansas state trooper on the other side of the interstate on the side of the road. And my son Austin, he's like, oh, look out, or he said something like that. And I was like, oh, man. And so we're just driving, and then I see the state trooper, the Kansas state trooper, pull off the shoulder, takes down the road, cuts off in the middle of the interstate, through the grass, and then he's coming towards us. And I'm starting to get shaky, y'all. Really nervous. The trooper comes up right beside us in the fast lane. He was doing like 100 to catch up to us, and then he all of a sudden is going like 70. And you know what? You got to just do what you would do if you're Joe Normal. Your hands are on the wheel. You don't look shook. I just looked over like, what's going on, man? I just looked at him, and he's staring at me, and he's looking at my son and looking at me, and my heart is beating hard, but I just kept on, just act normal. Act like, you don't know why the hell he's looking at me. And he just hovered there. What it felt like was like an eternity, but it was probably less than a minute. Then he slows down and then gets onto the shoulder, and we keep on going. Y'all, that was the closest I ever came to getting busted on the road. And I would have had my son with me. That would have looked real dumb in the newspapers. And I'm so thankful God showed me mercy in that period of time. So needless to say, I'm not going through Kansas no more. That flat ground leaves you just wide open like a deer in the middle of a field to get shot. It was just dumb. So I decided we're going to take the northern route, or I'm going to take the northern route through Nebraska. Now, it adds an hour to your time, but well worth it because you're not in that flat ground. You got to be in Kansas for a little while. You get into Nebraska, then you're on the west side of Nebraska, and then boom, you're in Colorado, right? So Nebraska, unfortunately, was the place that my driver got busted at. But that wasn't because Nebraska, it wasn't because I changed the plan, it's because he made a traffic violation. But anyway, so another time, this is when I decided I'm getting big enough to where I don't have enough time to be taking 3 days to drive to Colorado and do the dealing. You know, I didn't have all that time. So I had a good friend who was a small-time dealer that I was dealing to. And I said, hey, man, I think it'd be a really good idea if you be my driver. And I said, I'm going to pay you $150 a pound, which equated to him to, $150 times 50, $7,500 a week this cat was making. He's making really good money. And he was really professional. His father used to be a pastor, so the first few routes we did, like he put a Bible on the dashboard. He even borrowed a church van one time. Man, that was, for me being a Christian now, that's so wrong. That's so dirty. But so I had my boy D, and he was my driver now. But I needed to introduce him because he was already working with P a little bit, right? But now I think I told y'all I hooked up with a guy in Colorado that made my business really boom, and he had the supply working out, and it was no problem. I was getting the good stuff. But this guy didn't trust anybody. He didn't want anybody to know about him. He was real protected. So I had to have an in-person meeting with me, my driver, and him, C, in Colorado. He's the guy I met at the Cannabis Cup. I think it was 2014. And so I was dating Amber, my wife. I was dating her at the time, and her and I flew to Colorado. Rented a car, nice car at the airport, and D drove to Colorado. And so we all met up there, and we all met up in this hotel room, right? And so the meeting went really good. I was like, this is my driver. I vouched for him. He's my man. And the driver's going to come and meet you here in Colorado. I'm not going to be coming up here every weekend trying to do this. So the trust was made. But in this instance, so I had to drive with Amber in this rental car to C's house and get all that 50 pounds of pot from C's house and take it to the hotel to meet D, my driver. And so Amber really didn't know that this was going to go down, that she was going to be involved in a small drug run. Small meaning a short distance. We had to drive from the suburbs of Denver to, the outskirts of Denver. And it was, half an hour ride. And, she got nerves of steel too. Not to say she really even planned on doing it, but she did it. And I made the connection, and that's when I started getting my own driver, and everything really worked out well. I think maybe a month or so later, I had met this dealer in Kentucky, and this dealer was doing 300 pounds a week. This guy was crazy big, and he had already gotten busted twice, and he was like, man, I got enough money, I ain't even worried about it. And he gave me all these kind of crazy ideas, and I thought about scaling up from 50 pounds to 200 or 300 pounds, on a weekly basis. And so I went up to Colorado. I met up with C, and I was like, I'm thinking about using some other kind of transportation to make this work, either a big van with a hidden bottom or something else. And he's like, I got a guy for you to meet. So I met this guy, me and C did, at this bar in Denver. And this guy was he was a pilot. He owned his own little Cessna plane. And so he started talking to me. He's like, yeah, I can fly to any small airport, and I can do it. And his prices were going to be like, I was paying $7,500 a week, and this guy said, I'll do it for $10,000 for the flight, and that'll include everything. I'm like, so I can get 200-300 pounds for $10,000 transported. That was a really good deal if you think about it, because I was really getting 200 pounds for a month for $30,000. If I could do 200 pounds for $10,000, that's $20,000 extra in my pocket a month. That's pretty good, up. And so I thought about it, and to get the kind of money to make it worthwhile to buy 200 pounds at the same time, that would be $460,000 of pot. If I'm doing that, right, 115,000, 15, 460,000. Yeah. I just didn't have that kind of money. I would have if I saved it all, but like I told y'all in the first story, I spent that money just as fast as I got it. And I could have had $750,000 very easy. I could have had $500,000 in a little bit more than a half a year. But, when I left the game, I only had $30,000. I mean, when you count up that money, I was making $750,000 a year. And what did I have to show for it when I left? I had enough money for me and Amber to do furniture for a summer. And we ate $10 a meal for the both of us, cutting coupons for that whole summer. And so, like, if I could go back, I obviously wouldn't do that again. But if I could go back, I could have done retired, But I'm going to tell you what. In the Bible, Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth obtained by fraud dwindles. He who gathers gradually by honest labor will increase his riches. And I tell you what, that money that I made, it flew away like a bird, and it's just the way that God operates. If you're not acting honestly, then you're not gonna stack up that money. I couldn't have obviously put it into an IRA or the stock market, because I wouldn't, I had to involve taxes with that stuff. I couldn't do that. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, he who loves money never has enough. And man, I tell you, that's true. I had enough when I started this whole thing. I mean, my initial thoughts on getting in the game was to just have enough to cover what I smoked. But it ended up never being enough until I could not be satisfied with anything. And that's when I woke up. And Proverbs 23:5 says, when you set your eyes on wealth, it's suddenly gone. For wealth certainly makes itself wings like an eagle that flies to the heavens. And I can tell you, if you don't make your money right, honestly, if you cheat people, it's going to fly away. And I tell the same thing to people who want to play the lottery. That quick money is nothing but a bullet in your head. It's not going to make you happy. I don't even play the lottery, y'all. I don't play those scratch games because I don't want that fast money. I've had that fast money, and that fast money will not make you happy. It's going out there, working honest, doing the best you can every single day. That's when you're going to be satisfied. Do the best you can for yourself. Don't compare yourself to other people, because that's not going to make you happy. All right, y'all. That's the end of episode 4. I hope y'all really liked it. Tales of Chasing Shadows. I hope you understand what that means. If you're driving on the interstate, you look over, the sun's shining, you see that shadow. That's what I'm talking about. I love y'all. Share this with your friends and family on your social media. Let's get the word out. God is good. God loves you.